And you look at Dan Campbell, I thought his role more was kind of button up why some of the coaching moves were made. Tashard Choice moving Scotty Montgomery from the running backs coach to coach receivers. He told Lions on SI that look, he expects that Montgomery is going to be a big factor in the passing game. He expects the relationships with Amon-Ra and J-Mo to be really beneficial working with Scotty Montgomery. And I think to continue his pursuit of, I think Scotty Montgomery is on the track to become an NFL head coach. I think having another opportunity to work with receivers is going to benefit him. And maybe the Lions offense as well. You look at it from the perspective of the Detroit Lions, the coaching staff is overhauled. And he explained, Dan Campbell talked about why Calvin Shepard was the right call, learning that there was over 20 interviews conducted to try to find these replacements. And it's one of those situations in which he did not take it lightly who was brought to the table. And I think it's intriguing. One of the interesting nuggets as well was the fact that there's three now former quarterbacks on the roster with Sopo, Gradkowski on the roster as well, coaching. I think the coaching staff rounded out. He did say, look, it's not, nothing really too much to read into that. It's just that he finds individuals that he believes fit the Lions coaching staff culture that are going to push the players, work with those that are going to be, skill positions, and they think that the Lions have done a good job. And I know there's concerns. It's natural. What's the level of fall off potentially going to be from last year to this year, or can there be improvements? What'd you take away from Dan Campbell and his, real honest assessment of how he rebuilt the coaching staff?
Yeah, I mean, he seems super excited about the group that he's brought in as far as new coaches are concerned, with Tyler Roll, obviously, who's been kind of all over in terms of coaching positions and played running back at North Dakota State and was and had offensive coordinator duties, and then went to Iowa State, assistant head coach, running backs coach, and now he'll coach the tight ends. I'm really intrigued by that fit for him, just because he said he tried to hire Roll 2 years ago. As far as when they had a vacancy, I don't believe he specified which vacancy it was, but Tyler Roll is a guy that's been on Dan Campbell's radar for quite some time now. So I'm intrigued to see how he does with that tight end group, starting with Sam Laporta. And then Tashard Choice, obviously, he's a guy that was good enough for the Lions to say, hey, Scotty Montgomery, you're going to go coach receivers now. And while Montgomery has experience coaching receivers at the NFL level, so it wasn't that big of a move, it's still intriguing enough because one of your best coaches on staff, and Scotty Montgomery, is moving away from one position group and going to another. So I think that those two guys specifically are super intriguing to me. And then it sounds like Bruce Gradkowski is going to go with the wide receivers and be kind of that assistant wide receivers coach. And then Marquez Tuiasosopo is going to be in the quarterback room with Mark Brunell. So a lot of interesting new faces who have different backgrounds and a lot of experience in different areas that will bring new vision to the Lions staff. And starting with John Morton and all these new faces, I think the offense could have a little bit of a different look. With that said, though, I don't think the offense is going to ever stray too far from its identity. So a lot of exciting changes for the offensive staff in particular. But I think the biggest point that I came away from Dan Campbell's press conference with was the fact that they sat down, him and Aaron Glenn sat down about 2 years ago and said, okay, we really like what Kelvin Shepard's doing. We want him to be a defensive coordinator. And so they kind of each year increased his workload a little bit. And then when the time came and Aaron Glenn went to coach the New York Jets, I think it was a no-brainer. Kelvin Shepard, I believe, is a star in the making in this business, and I think a lot of people feel that way across the league. So I'm really excited to see how he leads this defense. And he had a great talk about standards that I was just blown away.
Yeah, and I think that the thing with the coordinators is there's still familiarity with John Morton,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that people still are learning about him. We did get a chance to talk in depth with both the coordinators. We're going to recap that here shortly, but I just think that to wrap up Dan Campbell, I think that his vision, he's built up enough equity and trust to recognize that if he targets somebody, he indicated that he wanted to Tashard Choice a couple years ago and it just didn't work out. So once people forget, Dan Campbell's job is not only to identify talent that's going to work well on the field, his job is to also, understand that the coaching staff probably when you're a good team is going to turn over probably even a lot faster nowadays. Calvin Shepard probably is on a track to be a head coach. Scotty Montgomery, potential coordinator down the road. So the one thing that you can look at with Dan Campbell is he probably has a great eye for also coaching talent, knowing that he worked with Sean Payton. He's seen He's seen coaching staffs turned over. I think that the opportunity is there to kind of have some trust that the coaching staff should be able to motivate the players and keep the standard very high in regards to expectations for what Detroit Lions football is supposed to look like.